This video is an explainer of the ongoing Sudan crisis. So, first let us understand the geographical position of Sudan in the world map. Sudan is strategically located near the Red Sea in Northeast Africa, and it is the third largest African nation. It is also one of the poorest countries in the world. The bordering countries are Egypt, Eritrea, Ethiopia, Libya, South Sudan, Central African Republic, and Chad. Sudan's capital, Khartoum, is located roughly in the center of the country, at the junction of the Blue Nile and White Nile rivers. It is part of the largest urban area. Recently, an intense clash broke out in the Khartoum between Sudan's military and paramilitary forces. The violence has claimed the lives of hundreds of people, and thousands became refugees. The ongoing crisis in Sudan has repercussions beyond borders. In this context, let's look into the happenings in Sudan and the reasons behind it. In order to understand the issue properly, we should have a brief idea about the history of Sudan. Sudan was under British and Egyptian colonial rule. It became independent in 1956 and had numerous changes in government since then, including military coups in 1985, 89 and 2019. Sudan's first civil war broke out several months before independence on 1st January 1956, and it lasted until 1972. The 17-year conflict ended with a treaty signed in neighboring Ethiopia. Under this, the president granted autonomy to the south. This is called Addis Ababa Agreement of 1972. It ended the conflict only temporarily, and in 1983, the civil war again started. The 11 years of relative peace collapsed when President Jafar Nimeri decided to revoke South's autonomous status and enforce Islamic Sharia law and crush southern troops. By this time, the comparative lack of economic development in the south had become a new source of regional grievance, and the northern leaders continued to Islamize the Sudanese legal system. It became another source of discord. In 1983, the rebels of Sudan's People's Liberation Movement, led by John Garang, rose up to change the Islamist rulers in Khartoum into a secular democratic New Sudan. In 1989, Omar al-Bashir took power in a coup and cracked down on the southern rebellion. Southern guerrillas also fought within themselves, with one faction fighting for the south to break away. Northern rebels also battled the government in eastern Sudan, Blue Nile and the Nuba Mountains. Attempts to end the civil war included numerous discussions, ceasefires and agreement, but yielded very little success until 2005. Some sources estimate as many as 2 million people were killed and another 4 million displaced in the 22-year war. The war ended on 9 January 2005 when Garang signed a peace accord with Bashir's government. This peace accord was mediated by Kenya. The cornerstone of the accord was a protocol exempting the South from Sharia law and granting it 6 years of self-rule ahead of a 2011 referendum on whether to remain part of Sudan or secede. And on 9th July 2011, oil-rich South Sudan proclaimed independence, splitting Africa's biggest country into two. As South Sudan separated, conflict resumed in Nuba Mountains and Blue Nile in areas held by former guerrillas, now called the SPLM North. Another important crisis in the history of Sudan is the war in Darfur. It is also nicknamed as the Land Cruiser War. It was a major armed conflict in the Darfur region of Sudan that began in February 2003. The Sudan's Liberation Movement and the Justice and Equality Movement rebel groups began fighting against the government of Sudan. The non-Arab groups rose up against the government in Khartoum, alleging racial discrimination, marginalization, and exclusion. Khartoum responded by unleashing the Janjaweed, a savage militia group of nomadic Arab raiders who attacked Darfuri villages on camel and horseback alongside regular soldiers. According to the United Nations, in the first 5 years of the conflict claimed 3 lakhs of lives from direct combat as well as disease and malnutrition. Around 2.5 million were displaced. The International Criminal Court in Hague in 2009 and 2010 issued arrest warrant for President Bashir for war crimes, crimes against humanity and genocide committed in Darfur. On 31st August 2020, the government and most rebel groups agreed a landmark peace deal, but sporadic clashes continued. Now let's see the background of the recent crisis. Sudan began its halting transition towards democracy after military generals removed President Omar al-Bashir in April 2019. Al-Bashir had presided over the country for nearly 30 years. After Bashir's removal, civilians continued to demand democratic elections and a civilian-led government. Later that year, the military and an alliance of civilian groups known as the Forces for Freedom and Change signed a constitutional declaration. It outlined a power sharing agreement between the two sides and provided a roadmap for governing the country until a democratically elected government could be installed. The council consists of both military officers and civilians, and it is tasked with leading Sudan to elections in 2023. Abdullah Hamdok was the Prime Minister for the transitional period. Under the Constitutional Declaration, a Transitional Sovereignty Council composed of 5 military and 6 civilian members was established. A military general was chosen to lead the council for the first 21 months, after which a civilian would lead. A legislative assembly of no more than 300 members was provided, but for not immediately formed. This arrangement was abruptly halted by a coup in October 2021, which led to the dissolution of the Sovereignty Council. The military formed a new Sovereignty Council led by the general, but later reinstated the previous Prime Minister but did not include any FFC members, and it was not supported by them or many other civilian groups and political parties. It triggered new mass pro-democracy rallies across Sudan. The military overthrew Hamdok government in October 2021 and General Abdel Fattah al-Burhan became the de facto leader of the country. He announced that the military would hold power until elections are held in July 2023. This led to protests and tensions between the army and the RSF. Since mid-April, the conflict has caused heavy fighting in Khartoum and other parts of the country. At the heart of the clashes are two men, Sudan's military leader Abdel Fattah al-Burhan and the commander of the paramilitary Rapid Support Force Mohammed Hamdan Dagalo. Until recently, they were allies. The pair worked together to topple ousted Sudanese President Omar al-Bashir in 2019 and played a pivotal role in the military coup in 2021. However, tensions arose during the negotiations to integrate the RSF into the country's military as a part of the plans to restore the civilian rule. The key question is who would be subordinate to whom under the new hierarchy. RSF has a controversial past. It was founded by Bashir to crush the rebellion in Darfur region 20 years ago. It was also known by the name Janjaweed, which became associated with widespread atrocities. In 2007, its troops became the part of country's intelligence services. In 2013, Bashir transformed the militia Janjaweed into a semi-organized paramilitary forces overseen by him and led by Dagalo. He gave their leaders military ranks before deploying them to crush the rebellion in South Darfur and then dispatching many of them to fight in the war in Yemen and later Libya. Dagalo turned against Bashir in 2019. The RSF led by Dagalo and the regular military forces under Burhan cooperated to oust Bashir in 2019. But tensions increased over the demand of the RSF to integrate into Sudanese military. In April 2023, Dagalo mobilized the RSF against al-Burhan's government. The fighting broke out in Sudan's capital on April 15th and quickly escalated to other parts of the country. Now let's see the current scenario in Sudan. Intense clashes between Sudan's military and paramilitary forces have killed hundreds of people and sent thousands fleeing for safety. It created political, economic, and humanitarian concerns as civil war threatens to destabilize the wider region. The clashes erupted in the middle of April. The ongoing conflict between the army and RSF is a significant setback to Sudan's transition to democracy. The violence has claimed the lives of hundreds of people, including innocent civilians like Indian national Albert Augustine. Some experts fear that the conflict could escalate into a wider conflict leading to country's collapse. As international pressure mounts on the warring parties to end the hostilities, the world waits to see if Sudan can find a peaceful path forward.